Our blocking system rules signal aspect of the indication distance block with the interlocking signal and indication that shown with the special instruction signal aspects that identify the position, left-point arm, color lights, flashing light, position with the light, any of the combination aspect with the qualified by the marker plate with the number plate, with letter plate, and the marker light with the signal is made to display with the color light aspect with the left-point arms or color lights. Location signals view of the room in the train block with the interlocking so with the generally with the right of the track, however the may be located with the left above the or above the track. Display indicates the two track with the two bracketed signals may be located with the support man with the signal with the right governs of the track with the right and the signal with the left governs the track to the left. Show the right and the left above and the bracketed. When signals go to the blocks, I have the signal of both govern the use of the block with the interlocking so the governor use of the interlocking routes when the track is signal beyond the interlocking limited direction moving over the interlocking signal is also block. Interlock the signal also block signal. All other rules where required remain in effect with complying with the indication of the block interlocking signal and properly displayed signals that are absent lights, except as shown in the block of the cab. The interlocking signal aspect with a special instruction for the light with the absent with the white light is displayed where colored or lunar light should be. Additional colored or lunar lights are displayed with regarding the block of the interlocking signal display when the most restricted indication can be given. However, when the sophomore arm is positioned and plainly see the aspect will govern. Where stop must be made. Where the movement is being made with the trim of the black signal requirement of the train being prepared to stop at the next stop. Signal stop must be made before any part of the train passes with the black signal requirement of the train to stop. Train overrun to the black signal that requires the stop of the crew must warn others in train that once by radio stop the train immediately report the train to the dispatcher. Changes in established route. Except to avoid incident after the control signal has been cleared with the closely approaching the train, when the control operator must change the signal before approaching the train. Engineer has assured the control operator that has complied with the signal chain, but it does not establish the authorized conflicting route until the communication while the approaching train crew. Ensuring the train has been stopped or cleared with the conflicting route, the control operator must establish the conflicting route that is to be occupied or blocked with the interlocking limits of the authorized with the conflicting movements unless it's safe to do so. Control operator must avoid operating the device control, switch or derail movable point frog lock with any of the portion of the train is on or closely approaching the equipment. Protection signal applying with the track is damaged. If the signal applying with the function properly with the track is damaged, signals that govern movements of effect for the browser must display with the stopped indication. No movements of the start of the browser may be permitted into the track with the signal applying with the examine the movement can occur safely. Protection during repair. The CTC limits of the manual, the interlocking limits of the unless the track bulletin form B is in effect with the switch for the movable point frog with the derail signals under the repair with the disconnected when the track is obstructed remove it from service display with the stopped indications for all affected routes condition with the block of the mark with any of the control to prevent their operation. Maintenance force may contact with the control operator before beginning repair of the disconnected equipment obstructing the track. Moving the track from the service to the switch movable point frog with derails must be spiked with a screw with the required position if any of the movement other than them occurs before the repairs are complete. Hard authority to proceed except when signal you to provide protection when the CTC limits of the manual interlock with the control operator must give the hand signal with the bearers but relies on authorized movement beyond the stop indication where proceeding indication can be displayed with the movement. Manual interlocking control operators must give the hand signal so the crew member can understand the signals know how they train when the hands are intended. For reporting delay with the control signal is displayed with the proceed indication notify the control operator immediately if the movement cannot occur promptly. Track occupancy indicated with the track occupancy indicated with the located employees must observe the indication before the following circle. The changing of the derail main track switch occupied indication displayed with the train's equipment that must not follow the main track unless the movement is properly protected. Track occupancy indication that do not authorize movement that relieve the employees from protecting movements if required by the rules. Changing the signal indication signal display of the preceding indication chain with do an indication requiring a train to stop. The train must stop at once. Report such for the signal change within the train dispatcher. Failure to display most restrict the indication when a block is occupied with the switch for the protect of the signal chain with the normal position. Signal failed with the display. The most restrict the indication regard the signal as a display and restricted with the indication regard the signal as displaying a stop. The train must stop immediately and employees must warn others of the radio exact location status of the train with the contact with the train dispatch control operator. Do not move the train without permission. Next governing signal. Train must comply with the next signal indication with the aspect that can be clearly seen with the signal of the governor of the track with the movement is occurring when it will be made. This does not apply when the rule with the previous signal indication requires movement of the restricted speed. Train delay within a block of the train that's into the block list perceiving the indication that does not require the restricted speed with the train with the stop at the speed with reduced to below 10 miles an hour. The train must ABS perceive the automatic block signal to perceive the restricted speed of the train must maintain the speed until the next signal is visible for the signal display with the proceeding indicating from the track with the signal is clear. Signal was proceeding indication train speed with reduced to 10 miles an hour restricted speed stand is visible. Track is clear. Proceed signal. 3TT manual interlocking limit to proceed with the perceive at the top of the next signal until the next signal is visible with the signal display with the proceed indication. ACS operating according to cab signal indication. Approach the automatic interlocking train must proceed and prepare to stop the interlocking signal when moving below 25 miles an hour, passing the signal with the governor to the approach of the automatic interlocking, or speed reduced to below 25 miles after passing the signal with the governor to the approach to an automatic interlocking. Train must continue with the move prepared to stop the interlocking signal until the train reaches the point with approximately 1,000 feet from that signal. The interlocking signal indicates the proceed with the train must be resumed speed. Initiating movement between the signals when one of the following occurs. Move the restricted speed until the leading wheels have the pass for the next governing signal. The end of the block system. Train enters block with no governing signal. No governing signal. Restricted speed. Alright, diagram A. The previous signal indication is unknown, but the movement in the opposite of the direction which the block was entered the show of the restricted sign and speed of the if the train with the ACS ATC territory operative of the cab signal train may operate according to the cab signal indication. Movement signal requiring restricted speed of the train path. The signal requiring movement of the restricted speed. The train must move with the restricted speed until the leading wheels have path with the next governing signal end of the block system. Stop indication CTC territory. A signal displaying with the top indicate that no conflicting movement is evident, but the train will be governed as follows. The crew member must immediately contact with the control operator and lift the train within track of the time limit. The enter of the track of the time limits for any of the point other end of the track with the time limits. Before authorizing train to proceed with the control operator must know the route with the proper design with a non-conflicting movement with the occupying authorized to the end of the track between the signal with the next absolute signal governing movement to the end of the CTC with the applicable. When the train receives the instruction that after stopping the train that the location has the authority to pass signal display with a stop indication specifying the route where applicable the train must move at a restricted speed. If signal governs the movement over the drawbridge, the crew member must verify that the bridge is in proper position for the train pass exemption. Alright, conflicting movement. When the control operator has stopped the conflicting movement, that he may be authorized to another train to proceed with the same limit to avoid advising both crews of the movement to be made with the stop movement. It is later permitted to proceed with the train must move at the restricted speed until the leading wheels have the next governing signal at the end of the block system. Manual interlocking. The signal display with the stop indicates that no conflicting movement evident of the train will be governed as well. The crew member must immediately contact with the control operator authorized with the train to proceed with the control operator must know that the route is properly designed. No conflicting movement is occupying the authorized to enter the track between the signal with the next absolute signal governing the movement at the end of the interlocking limits where applicable. Control operator may authorize the train to receive the hand signal and follow the instruction after stopping the train at the location authorized to pass the signal display stop with the indication to specify the route where applicable the train must move at the restricted speed. Signal governs movement over the drawbridge. Crew member must verify that the bridge in the proper position of the train path before proceeding into the CTC territory. Manual interlocking control operator must make sure that the CTC control operator has given authority to proceed. Exemption conflicting movement. The control operator has stopped the conflicting movement that he may authorize another to train proceed with advising both crews of the movement to be made and stop movements if later permitted to proceed with the train must move at the restricted speed until leading wheels have passed the next governing signal end of the block signal. Automatic interlocking. If the signal displaying with the stop indicates the crew will govern the instruction and will leave the box with the special instruction the other instruction. After complying with the instruction, they allow train to proceed. Signal continue to display with the stop indicate the train must be at restricted speed. However, if the conflicting movement, the train must not proceed until the movement has passed or stopped and both crews agree with the next movement. The ABS territory. After signal over the stopping indication outside the interlocking limit, the train will be governed at the main track with the main track except for the rule 914. Movement over the current over the traffic is in effect with the after stopping the train authorized beyond the signal. May proceed at restricted speed under any of the following conditions. Authority beyond the signal is joint with the other trains and employ the permit engine with or without cars to couple with its train or standing of the cars, and if the track between the engine and the car is clear, crew member has contacted the train dispatcher obtained with the permission of the path of the stop indication. However, the train dispatcher cannot be contacted more than 150 feet past the signal. Wait 5 minutes and then proceed with the restricted speed. Movement over the current traffic on main track with rule 914. Movement with the current of the traffic is in effect with the stopping of the crew member must contact with the train dispatcher control operator obtained with the permission of the path of the stop indicates to proceed the restricted speed. However, special governing movements of the signal main track comply with rule 917 entering main track hand operated springs ways that proceed with the restricted speed. Alright, siding of the other track with a signal governing the movement of the siding other track with the main track comply with the rules 917. Entering main track with a hand-operated spring switch. For that, proceed with a restricted speed with an instruct the operator the dual control switch by hand. If the roll operator cannot lie with a dual control switch at the desired position, control machine does indicate the switch is line or live with the control operator must authorize the movement of the path with the top indication. Instruct the employee with the operator with the switch by hand. The movement may then proceed with the switch. Before passing over the switch, the train must stop. The employees must operate the switch by hand as outlined in Rule 913. One hand operated dual control switch at least where one unit cards pass over the switch point, but the employee must return the switch point to power unless the otherwise instructed by the control operator. Hand operation with the dual control switch. The employee must give the permission for the control operator to operate with the dual control switch hand and operate with the switch as followed. Unlike the switch lever, the place of the lag selector, align with the hand position, remove the hand crank with the holder, operate the hand thrower lever switch position with the seam of the move when the lever is operated even when the switch is lined with the intended route with the line. With the switch intended route with the inch of the crank of the shaft with the turn of the crank as followed as it will turn with the switch with the desired position, remove the crank from the shaft with the button to return with the crank holder, return the switch to the power, restore the selector lever with the position motor and power position, lock with return crank with the hold the secure and the switch live with notify the control operator after the power head switch is restored. When the selector leveler is in the hand position, the crank has been removed from the holder and single governing movement over the switch with the still will display stop indication movement will be governing with the employee with the operating of the switch, notified by the engineer if possible when the switch is hand operation when it has been restored with the power operation other type of the switch machine with followed above the procedures even the instruction for the operation post of the switch and special instruction. Alright, movement over the current traffic on tracks designated with the timetable of the trains will run with the current traffic to give the train dispatch for the current operator to give the authorization control signal, indicate the proceed with the report clear with the track, have the current with the traffic, the train crew with a member of the rear of the operating the train, have the current with the traffic, the member clear of the time of the report, having passed specific location on which when they know the track is complete with must be determined by one of the following ways. The rear of the train has rear end of its elementary device, air pressure on the head end of the device, indicate with the brake pipe, continue with the employee with the verify with the marker on the rear of the train, the crew member observe the rear of the car over the train with which is marked and play with the train, stop with an inspection, verify with the markers on the rear of the car with the train, the track side in warning detector, transmit with the axle count of the train with the axle count duplicated with the axle count transmitted by previous track side warning detector. In addition, with the tracking clearing with the siding of the other track must comply with the requirements outlined in Rule 8.3 main track switches before reporting clear of the limits. Track permits on other designated within the timetable of the track permits will authorize with the train with the track car machine or employee with the occupy the main track of the tracks of the main train specific point with the track permits must be issued with the designated with the control operator under the direction of the train dispatcher within the limits of movement that may be in either direction according to the signal indication limit designated by a switch extend with only with the signal governing movement over the switch unless the otherwise designated. Train must obtain the authority to pass the control of the signal display stop with the indication of the enter of the track with a permit with the track's permanent limits of a train after stop they may pass with the signal display stop indication of the restricted speed without further authority except within the signal governs the movement at the interlocking. Issuing the track permits may only be issued if the limits are clear, with the limits are occupied by the train with the track car machine, the employee who will receive the track with the permit limits are occupied by the train, track car machine, or employee holding the track permit. All trains moving in single indication without the track permit have passed the location where the track will be followed. The track permit limit must be protected with the control signal with the designated control operator but must know the following before the issue of the track permit. Each control of the signal protection of the limited display of the stop indicates the marker to block the device preventing the displaying signal for the movement into this limits. Designated control operator with each of the control operator control of the signal to protect with the limits to understand the limits have provided with the protection have recorded with the track permit on the prescribed form. Track permit acknowledgement of the track permit authority must be recorded with the repeated with the control operator with acknowledgement that must be received before the being acted upon with the control operator must maintain with the record with the authority granted. More than one track permit is effective at any of the time in the same limit that all effective train with employees must be notified. The track must move with a restricted speed within the limits clearing the track permit. The marking of the blocking device must not be changed with removed until the limits if it has not been relieved. The control operator track permit limited must be cleared, but the report of the clear of the control operator must before the time expires. If the track permit is released before the time expires, all equipment must clear with the limits of the reported clear with the designated control operator. But however, no other track permit that has been granted with the same limit, the train must request the release of the track permit on the signal indication will govern the train with the control operator verbalize the authorize the release is specifying the direction of the movement if required and necessary to modify the expiration time. And the employee with the control operator must communicate before the time expires with the death of the time granted If the employee cannot contact with the control operator, the time limit expired with the authorities extended until the control operator is contacted. Employees reporting clear of the track permit authorized. The authorities must state their name and identification, the track permit number to being released, the lineman's being released, releasing the portion of the limit. The crew member informed the control operator of the authority of the release between the two specific points. If the authorized is considered void between those points, the track release must be begin in an hour limit of the authority. Stop and proceed indication signal of the signal of this displaying stop and proceed with the indication the train will be governed as well. The train must stop and proceed with the restricted speed. The train must pass signal as any restricted speed without stopping and doing any of the following. Leave the main track with a switch in line with the move of the track. It's clear with the signal to clearance point. Switch line to the clear of the clearance point of the main track. Stop the indication diagram A. Continue main track when meeting the passing of the train with the main track is clear through the opposite end of the side when the train is following the main track. The track is clear with the opposite end of the side of the top of the preceding indication diagram B. Permitted engine without car, with or without cars to couple the train within standing cut of the cars if the truck between the engine and the car is clear. Track clear between the engine and the car of the top and preceding indication. Diagram C. In a switch less than 1,000 feet beyond the signal employee in charge of the switch granted permission for the movement. The signal within 1,000 feet of the switch to be used. The employee with the charge of the switch has been granted the permission for the movement. Continue on the main track, proceed with the restricted speed due to the rule of the previous signal and indication move of the track at the time of the work between the track permit, track officer with the limit entering the signal track with a hand operating signal switch. With the CTC territory over the manual interlocking limits with the control, the operator must authorize the train into the track with a hand operated spring switch done with the governing signal exists. The control operator must verify that there is no conflicting movement before giving the authority. The ABS territory over the authorized with the enter of the signal track with the crew member of the switch tender must open the switch and wait 5 minutes after the switch. Establish block signal protection. If at the end of the 5 minutes the employee does not hear or receive the movement approaching to the train may enter the signal track at the crossover the line switch for the track. If the train is on, wait for the 5 minutes of the line with the other switch over the crossover. When the hand operating over the spring switch for the 5 minute wait is not required. Waiting 5 minutes operating the spring switch maybe a hand is not required unless the prescribed the rule 8-9 movement over the spring switch under any of the following conditions. Switch is equipped with an electrical lock, track occupancy, and indicator that indicates that the track is clear. The block signal government movement is a single track indicator that proceeds. Block signal governing movements of the single track that indicate that no train is approaching from either direction. Show the signal indicating no train approaching from either direction. Diagram A. Block to be entered occupied by the train engine car that has been standing moved away from the switch to be used. The same switch with the same block. Train standing within the way from the switch to be used. Main track between siding switches occupied with the train that has been met and standing train will be passed. Train occupied by the train as by met or pass. Train is entering the main track outside yard limit is authorized movement against the current over the traffic. Rule 614 restricted limits in effect with the provided movement that does not occur beyond the restricted limits of 5 minutes for the after the main track circuit is traveled unless the block signal is displayed with the preceding indication work authority time authorities granted with the DTC of the track permit to authorize the movement of the track warrant outside of the yard limit is authorized for the work between the two specific points. Signal protection with the automatic block system lining switch. When a train and the engine switch for the absolute block signal limits required the action necessary for the stop of the other train to provide with the lining with the locking of the main track switch against the movement at the or beyond the point of the train engine will stop the movement of the clear of the main track. The switch is located with the block of the other or unoccupied. Do not make movements until 5 minutes after the switch has been lined with. Also make sure there's no train and the engine between the switch of the train with the engine being protected within. Closely approaching the block where the switch is located, except the Rule 613 yard limit. The Rule 614 restricted limits is in effect. Train must receive the permission from the train dispatcher before crossing over the obstruction in another manner. Main track signal and for movement in one or both directions. Train and dispatch must ensure that no other movement is against the current of the traffic has been will be authorized. Crew members must notify the train dispatcher when their movement is clear for the other main track. In addition, before crossing over the following with the main track, the train must comply with the following. Do not move it until the 5 minutes after the lining of the switch. Locate the block signal to protect with the switch. Again, with the train, move with the current. Travel to move with again with the current of the traffic path. The signal move with the leading engine of the car beyond 100 feet beyond the signal. Wait 10 minutes before moving again further against the current of the traffic. Then proceed at restricted speed. Then move again with the current of the traffic beyond any further signals obtained with the authority outlined with the Rule 14.6. Movement against the current of the traffic. Rule 15.3. Authorized movement against the current of the traffic. 9.18. Electrically locked switches and derails. Special instructions posted near the switch will govern the operation of the switch and derails equipped with electrical locks. And the track with a manual interlock with the CTC limited employee must not open the case with the doors on the door or unlock electrically locked switch derail without track of the time and authority of the control operator like emergency release. If the electrical lock included with the emergency release does not break with the shield of the relief, the operator with the release without permission of the control operator of the train's dispatcher out of the wind, the communication failed with the shield of the may be broken, the relief the operator permitted the train leaving the main track with the permit the train that has authority to enter the main track. The train must enter the main track until 5 minutes after the seal is broken and or release operated. Notify the control operator of the train dispatcher when the seal has been broken and emergency release is operated. Leaving the equipment in the signal system. Engine cars and equipment must not be detached and left standing entirely between the opposing interlocking signal of the governing movement of railroad crossing at the grade. Show the non-circuited equipment entirely between the opposing interlocking signal may not activate with the current circuit. Do not depend upon the track equipment the other engine of the cars to actuate block signals interlock with the signal of the highway crossing signals or to be under the protection of such signals. Clear track circuits. The train engine car with the equipment left standing with the siding on the other track must be clear over the insulated joints to have the clearance point. Overlap circuits must be identified with the overlap sign of the train with the main track with the main point must not pass any overlapping sign location. Open and switch with the overlapping until the opposing of the train has entered the block. For the overlap, do not enter until the opposing train enter the block in advance of the meeting point, and then proceeding into the train must clear the overlap as soon as possible to avoid delaying with the following of the train unless otherwise instruct the train dispatcher train and sub of the meeting of the passing point. They must not overpass the overlap at a single location until the authorized leaving the siding. Standing on the standing of the rail, do not allow the engine with less than 3 cars to cut or cut 3 cars or cut 4 cars less to be stand on standard rail. Suspension block system. When authorized by the track bulletin may suspend the block system section of it. Do not suspend the block system section until the all train with the control operators effective with the territory that have not been notified. Track bulletin specify the limits of the suspension. The track bulletin issued to suspend the block system must not deliver the train into the effective territory with the effective limit is clear of the train until the track bulletin has been transmitted or delivered to all trains within the limited guideline within it while the block system is suspended. When the block system section are suspended with the following guidelines, the employee with the must follow the rule does not apply to the single territory of the train must receive the track bulletin and prescribe the speed restriction to exceed 59 miles an hour for the passenger train and 49 miles an hour for the other train. But the train will disregard the distinguished and illuminated block with an interlocking signal except the way the signal of the movements over railroad crossing a grade or draw bridge of the signal that are connected with the trackside warning detectors. Train must approach with the block and interlocking signal expect with above each of the suspend with the limits of the parade. Stop the train, leave with the limits of the must move into the block system territory must be restricted in the speed until they reach with the first signal with the service beyond limited signal with the governor move with the railroad crossing of the grade with the drawbridge is marked with regard with the display of the stop indication regardless of the aspect of the display with unless the track bulletin specify the signals are in service. If the crew does not move the signal governing the movement of the railroad crossing of the grade, the servant and the crew must provide the flag protection in each of the directions relating the routes before the proceeding over the car. The crew members must know not really on time. Crew members must not rely on time release of the key control of the operation as adequate protection moving over the crossing unless they are instructed otherwise on multiple main track with the track bulletin designated with the track of the track blocking system to suspend with the track bulletin and then specify with the track of the BU that will be issued each for the train. When automatic crossing warning devices have been effective, the action to be taken will be stayed with the track bulletin. Dual control switches on main track will be line locked with the main track move with the switches equipped with selective levels will be locked in the hand position. All over the dual control switches will be spiked. All concerned will be notified until they informed by the train with the dispatcher train must be stopped and inspect the dual control switch of the file with the server to make sure switch is properly aligned with before passing over. The track bulletins may be issued specified while the position of the dual control switches at the end of the dual track main track are left to be lined, and if the crew member receives notification from the train dispatcher for the position of the dual contract will switch, leave the loads of the switch of the position after you the swing switches. They'll remove the server that must be spiked within those connected concerned notified. If spring switches are left in server the trains make of the face point movement that must be prepared to the stop and lift and is unknown unless it is known that the switch is properly aligned with the block system has been returned. The normal operation of the track bulletin must notify all trains within the affected territory before any of the train can enter the limits of the be governed by the block system. 924 call lights. When the call light is on and the employee that received it and left the employee is on the moving train must contact the control operator immediately. 10 rules applicable to centralized traffic control.